Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. Today's video is going to serve as a bit of a monthly wrap-up where I look at my January TBR versus what I actually read and see how it measures up. Now, I am one that generally will stick to a TBR 80% of the time. I have been deviating a little bit more than that as of late. I'm not a big mood reader. I definitely need a plan going into the month just to sort of give me an idea of what I'm reading, what I'm looking forward to, so I can keep it flowing and avoid that burnout. I find if I mood read, I tend to just not. And then I get depressed because I'm not reading. So I tend to have a TBR so that way I've got something to keep moving. Virgos, man, it's exhausting. In the month of January, I wanted to read 5 books. I'm going to keep my TBR to about 5 to 6 books on the hard TBR, so I've got a little bit of wiggle room if I've got some time, or I'm not too pressured if I don't get to one of those books. Things like work, and if I go back to uni, uni will take up a lot of my time and a lot of my reading time. So, the 5 books that I had for January were Temple by Matthew Riley, Chapterhouse Dune by Frank Herbert, The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and The Look of a King by Tom Dumrell as my indie self-pub pick for January. So, I read 4 out of 5, and I'm currently still reading The Hero of Ages. Let's look at what I actually read. I do apologise, I'm going to be looking down here because this is where my computer is with the list of things that I read. So, I'm going to go in terms of star rating. The lowest I had on this list was 2.6, and that was a book called Man, Fuck This House by Brian Asman. This was only a novella, I believe. It was only 158 pages according to my stats. It was a horror novel, a haunted house, tropey horror novel. I believe what the author was trying to do was to take the trope of the haunted house that the family moves into and play with it a little bit. And I believe they did that, but it went too far. I wasn't sure when this book was trying to be serious versus when this book was trying to be comedic. And there was one moment where I did laugh out loud, which sort of boosted it. I was like, okay, well, that was clever that they've done. But essentially, we're following a young family. You've got 2 young kids, a young mum, and the dad who has moved for work. You know the story when they, it's tropey. So basically, you've got this 10-year-old kid who's a bit of a not very nice child. He's been playing with his mum for the last 10 years, trying to make her believe that he's possessed by this demon. And she feels like she's going nuts. And anyway, that's one storyline. And then you've got the house possession, which is they try and play on that. And the idea, the concept is cool, is that the house is possessed by someone, but the house itself is that entity. The house itself is the thing that is possessing these people. And the person that was there previously didn't look after the house, so the house has gone, well, stuff you, I need to be looked after. So the mum, who's a stay-at-home mum, looks after the house, and then the house is like, you are good, I will destroy everyone that tries to harm you, because I want you to clean me. It was odd. It was an odd book. Moving on. I had a couple of 3-star reads. Now, 3-star in my eyes is not a bad book. It just means that I wanted more from it, but it was still an enjoyable time. 3 is not a bad score at all. The first book I read this year was The Colorado Kid from Stephen King. It was the first hard case crime novel that he ever did. It was fine. It's a mystery, essentially, and we're basically following this young lass. She is a journalism apprentice, and she's got 2 older gentlemen who are taking her through this age-old mystery, which never got solved. And it's okay. It's one of those stories where you're looking back at another event and it's being told to you in sort of a chronological way, as in this happened, this happened, this happened. It was okay. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's not something that I'm ever going to pick up again. The next 3-star on this list was Kim Jiyoung Born 1982. Now, this book, for what it is, I will say, looking back on it and having reflected on it, I'm still thinking about this book. And it's about a young woman who is... Her husband's basically decided that she has to go to therapy because she's taking on the personality of other women in her life. What this book really is a character study of this woman and her life from childhood through to her adulthood and this mental illness that she's contracted. And it looks at how women as a whole have been treated in Korea from when she was a young age, and the beliefs that were set for women, or for girls and for women throughout their lifetime. This book is infuriating, particularly as someone who grew up as a female, and I will say that it makes you think, but it is very, very interesting to see the behind the scenes of her own belief system being shaped by societal expectations of others. It's only about, I think it's about 120 pages. It's 126 pages. I implore you to read this, even though, it was a 3-star for me because I didn't like some of the way it was written, and that's just a translation thing, that's a personal preference. It's a very, very important read. Alright, the last 3-star read was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and it was called When the Moon Shines by Lucia Ashtar. Now, this is the first book in the 6 Shooter and a Shifter series. I believe it's a 6-book series. It was fun. It's a Western fantasy romance. I don't read a lot of romance. The romance wasn't pushed down your throat, just the men were hot, essentially. They were hot and she wanted to bang them. But we didn't get a lot of the banging, so I assume that will happen in the next book. It was fun. It played on a lot of Western tropes. Essentially, they're all stuck in this portal town. They've got no way to get out. Sometimes the portal opens and new people jump through. So we get these two two men, I should say, that pop through who are very hot, and they have all the muscles, obviously, because it's a romance. We've got to remember that it's a romance. And they start causing all this havoc. What I really enjoyed about this book is just how much it played on Western tropes. It was a honky-tonk town. They were drinking moonshine. They were, you come through the portal and you're given a cowboy hat and a horse. It was fun. It was fun, but it wasn't excellent. It didn't knock my socks off. Will I pick up the second book and see if the banging happens? Probably. I'm not gonna lie. If I can get a NetGalley copy, then probably. You've hooked me into this series. Alright, and then we've got a 3.5 read, which was Temple by Matthew Riley. It was fine. If you're a Matthew Riley reader, you know that he's fairly formulaic. It's very much an action movie written in book form, so there's a lot of unbelievable action sequences that happen, and your protagonist is relatively untouchable, but it was a fun time. So basically we follow William Rice. He's a language professor, I believe. He's some sort of professor who can translate ancient text, and he's been picked out of university by his brother to go on this mission to translate this ancient manuscript, essentially to find the lost idol. Inside this idol is a metal that can power the supernova. The supernova is more powerful than nuclear technology. It could basically just wipe out the entire planet. So it's sort of a race against time between different military forces to get this idol so that they can't power this supernova. A lot of bang bang kaboom. Good guy gets out at the end. There's a lot of death in this one. Don't get attached to anyone going in. I'm not going to say any more than that because spoilers, but if you like a good action novel, I like them as palate cleansers. I know what I'm going to get. I know it's going to be a 3 to 3.5 star read when I head into a Matthew Riley novel, and that's sort of been the case with most of them, with the exception of Tournament, which was brilliant in my opinion. I had one 3.75 read on this list, which was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a Japanese translated work, and it was sweet, but it also explored the idea of what would you do if you could go back in time. We go into this cafe, and we're told that in this cafe there is one seat in which you can travel back in time. So there are 4 separate stories, and they're all interconnected with the people from the first story, and it's all about what would you do if you had a moment that you could go back and talk to someone. What would you try and do, knowing that you can't change anything? So there's a whole bunch of rules that, you know, if you sit in this seat, you've got to follow a whole bunch of rules, and one of them is that nothing will change in the future. So you can't alter the course of history. And it's still interesting in the decisions that people make when they want to sit in this seat. And I gave it a 3.75 because it made me think. And I really, really appreciate that in a book. It made me think, what would I do to go back and have a moment for something in my life to be repeated? Alright, then we jump into the 4-star reads, starting off with Chapterhouse Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, I find a lot of Frank Herbert's writing to be a little bit confusing, and I do need to slow it down or do double takes and read over it, but I still love it. Chapterhouse Dune was a deep dive into the Honored Madres and the Bene Gesserit, and I've wanted more from those 2 political powerhouses that have been the underlying factor in the entire series. I've wanted more for 5 books, and I got it in Chapterhouse Dune, and I don't have a whole lot more to say about it because the stories are complex, but you get this look at these 2 powerhouses and the different manipulations that they try and use against each other, as well as continuing the conversation about power versus corruption versus religious ideation, and the things that I love all sort of in this series. Now, it does end on a cliffhanger, which is annoying because we'll never get the next installment, but I really enjoyed it. This was probably my second favourite in the entire series after God Emperor of Dune. It was a good time. It was a good time. Okay, the last 4-star that I had was a non-fiction called Stop Doing That Shit by Gary John Bishop. He's a Scottish man with a way with words. It's a self-help book, which I don't normally pick up at all, and I wouldn't had my dad not gifted this to my sister and I at Christmas and gave us a gentle suggestion to read this. This book looks at identifying self-sabotage and the self-saboteurs that we all carry around with us. There are 3, essentially. The way that we think about ourselves, the way we think about others, and the way we think about the world. What this book does is help you unpack what your self-saboteurs are, and basically learn the way that you look at life without really thinking about it, and encourages you to do that in a more productive way, and sort of question why you're living the way that you're living. Moving right along, we've got one 4.25-star book, and that was my indie self-pub pick of the month, which was The Look of a King by Tom Dumrell. This book I just finished, so I know a little bit more about it. Follows Augustus and Cyrus. Augustus is thrust into the throne after an unfortunate event occurs, and Cyrus is a storyteller who dreams of adventure. This book is quite short at 264 pages, but it packs a punch. It's quite fast-paced. The prose I found was a little bit simplistic, but that being said, it was enjoyable. It wasn't done in a way that felt simplistic. I just like gritty fantasy. So for about 70% of the way through, I thought, okay, this is good. Probably sitting at about a 3.5. I enjoyed it. It would be a good palate cleanser. And that last 30% just took it to a 4.25 for me. It had a number of twists that I didn't see coming, and I did not put it down for the last 30%. I had to know what happens. And now I'm struggling with wanting to read that second one straight away, or waiting a little bit closer to when the 3rd book comes out, hopefully later this year. And finally, I read Jurassic Park, which was my one and only 5-star book of this month. I loved it. I've never read anything by Michael Crichton before. I had a feeling that this is my subgenre of sci-fi that I like, this theoretical science fiction where it is based in science. This book knocked my socks off. I've never watched the movie the whole way through either. So it was something else. The science behind it was believable. You had things like reports in the book that you could open up and read. The characters, it was an ensemble cast who, none of these people really knew each other, but they had associations within different scientific fields. We had a mathematician, we had the paleontologist, and the archaeologist and whatnot. And the characters acted like they didn't know each other, but they were trying to sort this horrific situation out, and it really felt authentic from these characters and how they would act with one another, and it was just, I was very, very impressed. I'm jumping into the Lost World in later this month, so hopefully I like it just as much. Anyway, that's it. That was my TBR versus what I actually read. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of it, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.